Darth Vader was once again alone. The rhythmic sound of his mechanical breathing echoed off the walls of his personal chamber. His life support suit, which had kept him alive after his fateful duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mustafar, had become more than a necessity. It was a constant symbol of his pain and weakness. He, the once powerful Anakin Skywalker, now depended on this machine for every breath, every movement. But in his darkest moments, an idea began to form. What if he could escape this fate? What if he could create a new version of himself, free from the limitations of his destroyed body? Cloning, a technology he knew was possible, might be the answer. As he sank into these thoughts, Vader remembered old Jedi lessons, fragments of knowledge about the transfer of essence. It wasn't just about cloning the body, but about something much deeper, moving your own consciousness, your own soul, into a new container. He was sure that the ancient Jedi had secrets about this kind of transfer, information that the Jedi Council kept hidden. During his explorations of the abandoned Jedi Temple, he had found fragmentary records that spoke of this possibility. If the Jedi could do it, then he, with his mastery of the dark side, could certainly surpass those limits. With this new knowledge, Vader made a decision. He would set about creating a clone of himself. In the depths of a secret Empire facility, the process began. The clone of Anakin Skywalker was formed in secret, its creation overseen by scientists loyal only to the Sith Lord. The body was perfected, designed to be as strong and agile as Anakin once was. However, the essence transfer, the final step in completing the plan, was not carried out. Something prevented Vader from proceeding at that decisive moment, and the clone remained a separate but living entity. As the clone went through a process of recovery and growth, it began to experience intense visions. In his mind, images of Master Yoda and the planet Dagobah repeated themselves incessantly. He saw flashes of a dense, misty forest and felt a strong connection to this place. There was something about Dagobah, something that seemed to call to him. The clone, still confused and struggling to understand his own identity, felt he needed to seek answers there. Once he had fully recovered, the clone didn't hesitate. He escaped from the facility where he had been raised, using the Force intuitively but still very precariously, leaving behind the Empire's structure and any remnants of control that Vader might have had over him. In his mind, the destination was clear: Dagobah. He knew that Yoda was there, and that the little Jedi Master might have the answers he so desperately sought. On arriving on Dagobah, the clone met Yoda. The Jedi Master initially hesitated. He sensed the presence of the dark side, but he also noticed something different. Anakin's clone, although it carried the darkness of its creator, seemed to have untapped potential, a light yet to be awakened. Reluctant but curious, Yoda decided to guide him. However, he would tell the clone only what was necessary, enough to guide him, without revealing his creator's dark past in full. Under Yoda's tutelage, the clone began to discover his true strength. Yoda, in his deep understanding of the Force, soon noticed something unusual about Anakin's clone. Although he was physically identical to the young Anakin Skywalker, there was more at stake than a simple genetic duplication. During the first few days of training, Yoda noticed that the clone had not only inherited the same potential that Anakin had developed throughout his life as a Jedi and Sith, but that this power seemed even more pure and refined. The clone's new, healthy body allowed him to access the Force in ways that Vader, limited by his injuries and dependence on his suit, never could. With each session of meditation and combat, the growth of his power was visible, almost frightening. As the training progressed, Yoda began to suspect that the Force itself had played a key role in the creation of the clone. Something other than artificial cloning seemed to be at work. The way the clone connected with the Force was inexplicable, almost as if the midichlorians in its body were amplified beyond what was natural. It was as if the Force, in a subtle way, had influenced the process of its creation, making the clone a being capable of accomplishing what Anakin, in his original form, had been unable to do: restore balance. For Yoda, this was a sign that the cycle of the Chosen One's prophecy might be repeating itself. However, despite this intervention by the Force, Yoda knew that everything would once again depend on the clone's free will. Increasing the number of midichlorians and providing a healthy body would not guarantee that the clone would follow the right path. The temptation of the dark side was still present, and Yoda knew well the weight of choices. Anakin's essence, even in the form of the clone, still bore the scars of his fall to the dark side. So Yoda could not directly interfere in his decisions. He would just guide him, letting the clone determine his own destiny, just as Anakin had once done. With this in mind, Yoda remained cautious. He knew that the clone's immense power could either be the key to the galaxy's salvation or its downfall. The Force had granted the clone a second chance, a rare opportunity to restore balance. But, as always, his ultimate fate would depend on the choices he made. Yoda watched, patient, as the clone faced his own inner demons, determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. He realized that the power of the Force flowed through him in a unique way. With each training session, his connection with the Force deepened, and he began to understand not only the dark side, but also the light side. The Force, as Yoda taught him, was not something to be mastered, but something to be understood and respected. Little by little, the clone awakened all his latent power and understood the true nature of balance. As his consciousness awoke, the clone began to realize something crucial. He wasn't just a creation of Vader. He had an identity of his own, and with that identity came the responsibility to right the wrongs that the old Anakin had committed. He knew that Emperor Palpatine was the true source of corruption in the galaxy, and that he, as a clone, had the power and responsibility to bring him down. The Anakin clone's decision to confront Palpatine did not come without hesitation. Even with all the preparation under Yoda's guidance, he knew he was about to face the most powerful being on the dark side of the Force. Palpatine was the architect of Anakin's downfall, responsible for turning him into Darth Vader. Now, the clone saw this battle as a reckoning not just for him but for the galaxy. Yoda, for his part, sensed the urgency and drive in his apprentice, but did not fail to warn him about the dangers of this endeavor. Just as he had warned Luke in the past, Yoda reminded the clone that the internal battle would be just as challenging as the external one, and that confronting Palpatine could awaken the same feelings that once led Anakin to ruin. Yoda's advice echoed in the clone's mind, bringing up the duality between justice and revenge. He knew that his greatest challenge would be to keep his connection to the light of the Force intact during the confrontation. But despite the warnings, he felt it was his responsibility to stand up to Palpatine, the archetype of corruption, and right the wrongs of the past. It was then, during a night of deep meditation on Dagobah, that an unexpected presence appeared to him, Qui-Gon Jinn. Just as Obi-Wan appeared to Luke before his confrontation with Vader, Qui-Gon came to Anakin's clone, bringing words of wisdom and hope. He reminded him that the Force is a living field, and that balance could not be restored by destruction, but by true understanding and acceptance. Qui-Gon reinforced that the path the clone was on was full of spiritual challenges, and that the confrontation with Palpatine would not only be physical. The Emperor was a master of manipulation, and the clone would need to be careful not to fall into the same traps that captured the original Anakin. He also warned that anger, fear, and hatred were weapons that Palpatine would use against him, and that only by remaining faithful to the light of the Force could he prevail. The mission, Qui-Gon reminded him, was not revenge. It was the restoration of peace. Anakin's clone, renewed by these words, understood that this fight was his last test of internal balance. With Qui-Gon Jinn's presence slowly dissipating, the clone felt more prepared than ever. Yoda's warning and Qui-Gon's guidance came together in his mind, strengthening his resolve. He knew that this battle was inevitable, but now he understood that the key to winning would not be Palpatine's destruction, but overcoming the darkness within himself. This moment of clarity was crucial for him to face the Emperor not as a being seeking revenge, but as a true agent of the Force, committed to restoring balance to the galaxy. The confrontation between Anakin's clone and Palpatine was a real test of strength, both physical and spiritual. When they met on the Emperor's throne, the atmosphere was heavy, as if the Force itself sensed the importance of the moment. Palpatine initially underestimated the clone, believing him to be nothing more than an unfinished creation, a shadow of the real Anakin. However, As the duel progressed, the Emperor began to realize the immense power that young, healthy body brought with it, a potential even greater than the one he had molded into Darth Vader. With a cruel smile, Palpatine tried to use his verbal manipulations, planting doubts in the clone's mind, provoking him to act in anger, to follow the same path that the original had taken. However, the clone was prepared. Qui-Gon's words and Yoda's warnings resounded in his mind, constantly reminding him that the real test was not to defeat Palpatine physically, but to resist the temptations of the dark side. Palpatine, seeing that his words had no effect, unleashed his full power, launching force beams towards the clone. But unlike the original Anakin, who had succumbed to manipulation, the clone stood firm. He was not the same impulsive young man who had once given in to fear and anger. Using the Force with a mastery that surprised even Palpatine himself, the clone was able to redirect the rays, remembering Mace Windu's words inherited from Vader's memory. "He's too dangerous to stay alive." With one decisive blow, the clone defeated the Emperor, putting an end to Palpatine's reign of terror. But victory over Palpatine did not bring immediate peace. There was still one last challenge to face: Darth Vader. The clone knew that to truly right the wrongs of the past, he would have to confront the man he himself had become. When the two met, the tension was palpable. Vader, on seeing the clone, was shocked to realize how powerful he had become. The former Sith, who had once believed himself invincible, now found himself facing a younger, stronger version of himself and, most importantly, free from the shackles of the dark side that imprisoned him. The duel that followed was intense, a true spectacle of the power of the Force, where each strike of the lightsaber reverberated like an explosion of energy. Vader, even with all his experience, began to realize that he couldn't win. The fury that had previously fueled his strength now seemed to turn against him, while the clone, with absolute control over his emotions, used the Force in a balanced way. Vader's every blow was counterbalanced with precision and serenity. The confrontation was not just a physical battle. It was an internal struggle for Vader, who began to feel the weight of his choices. At the end, Vader, visibly exhausted and shaken, dropped to his knees. He understood that the clone represented what he could have been if he hadn't succumbed to the dark side. In a gesture of surrender, Darth Vader accepted his defeat and swore loyalty to the clone, who now, fully aware of his role, forgave him. This moment of redemption was a turning point for both of them. Anakin's clone, now aware that he had righted the wrongs of the past, was ready to lead the galaxy into a new era. And Vader, relieved to finally be free of Palpatine's control and the dark side, accepted his new destiny, serving no longer as a villain, but as an agent for the restoration of peace. The confrontation between the two was not just a physical victory, but a symbol of the balance that was finally beginning to be restored in the galaxy. After this confrontation, Yoda finally revealed to the clone a long-kept secret: the existence of Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine and the truth about Anakin's children, Luke and Leia. The clone, now fully embracing his identity as Anakin Skywalker, knew he had to find his children and reconcile with Obi-Wan. Arriving on Tatooine, Anakin met Obi-Wan again. The old Jedi Master, who had given up hope of redeeming his former apprentice, was completely shocked to see the clone. After a brief conversation, Anakin met Luke, who was living as a simple child. Anakin then traveled to Alderaan, where he finally met Leia, now a little princess in training. The Skywalker family was together again, albeit under unexpected circumstances. With the help of Yoda and Obi-Wan, Anakin decided it was time to restore the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order. The Senate was re-established and the remnants of the Empire began to be dismantled. At the same time, a new generation of Jedi began to be trained, with Luke and Leia being the first apprentices of the new order. This new Jedi Order, however, would not blindly follow the old precepts. Anakin and his allies realized that the fall of the old order was due to the rigidity of its teachings. Thus, the new Jedi Order incorporated valuable lessons about the balance between light and dark, adapting to the galaxy's modern challenges. Anakin soon, encouraged by Yoda and Obi-Wan, took on a leading role in this new order, working side by side with the two masters to maintain balance in the galaxy. His power and wisdom grew, and he became the Jedi he should always have been. Meanwhile, Vader, now redeemed and completely surrendered to Anakin's power, dedicated himself to rebuilding the Republic and eliminating the last vestiges of the Empire. Over time, the galaxy entered a new era of peace and prosperity. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, finally fulfilled the prophecy. He brought balance to the Force, not in the way the ancient Jedi had imagined, but in a unique way, through his own journey of redemption and self-knowledge. In his final moments, Anakin reflected on his journey. He realized that, despite the mistakes and tragedies, he had found his way. Balance in the Force had been achieved, and he was finally at peace with his destiny.